Ladies and gentlemen, power has always appeared larger than life. It commands attention, shapes decisions, influences societies, and often creates the illusion of permanence. When people see a leader standing before crowds, issuing directives, commanding institutions, and receiving respect from millions, it can seem as though that authority will last forever. Yet history repeatedly teaches a different lesson. No matter how strong, popular, feared, or admired a leader may be, power is temporary. It is one of the few truths that has remained constant across centuries, cultures, and civilizations. From ancient kingdoms to modern governments, countless rulers have risen to extraordinary heights. They controlled armies, influenced economies, and shaped the destinies of nations. During their time, many appeared unstoppable. Their supporters believed their influence would endure indefinitely, while their opponents often struggled to imagine a future without them. But time has a way of changing every political landscape. Leaders who once dominated headlines eventually become historical figures. Governments that seemed unshakable face transformation. Political movements that appeared invincible encounter challenges, transitions, and sometimes decline. The passage of time reminds humanity that power is not something anyone truly owns. It is something temporarily entrusted to individuals. One reason power appears permanent is because people often focus on the present moment. When a leader is actively making decisions, speaking to the public, and influencing national affairs, it is difficult to imagine a different reality. The visibility of authority creates a sense of permanence. However, history encourages a broader perspective. Looking backward reveals an endless procession of leaders who once occupied positions of immense influence, but eventually stepped aside, were replaced, or faded from public life. Their experiences demonstrate that no office, title, or position can halt the natural cycle of change. The temporary nature of power is not limited to politics. It exists in every sphere of human life. Business leaders retire, military commanders relinquish authority, influential figures lose prominence as new generations emerge. The lesson is universal: positions may change, circumstances may evolve, and influence may diminish. What seems permanent today may become temporary tomorrow. Understanding this reality helps leaders maintain humility and perspective while they hold authority. For leaders, recognizing that power is temporary can be a source of wisdom. It encourages them to focus on service rather than self-glorification. When someone understands that their time in authority is limited, they are more likely to consider the long-term impact of their decisions. Instead of pursuing personal gain or immediate recognition, they may focus on creating lasting benefits for the people they serve. The awareness that power will eventually pass to others can inspire a leader to build institutions, strengthen systems, and leave behind a foundation that continues to benefit society long after their tenure ends. The temporary nature of power also serves as a warning against arrogance. Throughout history, some leaders became convinced that their position guaranteed lasting control. Surrounded by praise, insulated from criticism, and empowered by authority, they began to believe they were indispensable. Such confidence often led to poor decisions because it disconnected them from reality. When leaders forget that power is temporary, they may start prioritizing their own interests over the needs of the people. They may resist accountability, dismiss opposing voices, or assume they are beyond consequences. Yet history consistently demonstrates that arrogance built on power eventually encounters limits. For citizens, understanding the temporary nature of power is equally important. It reminds people not to place blind faith in individuals. Strong societies are built not merely on leaders but on principles, institutions, and collective responsibility. Leaders come and go, but nations endure. When citizens recognize that every holder of power is temporary, they become more committed to safeguarding democratic values, demanding transparency, and ensuring that authority remains accountable. This perspective strengthens societies because it places greater importance on systems rather than personalities. The story of leadership is often portrayed as a journey toward greater influence, but in reality, it is also a journey toward eventual transition. Every leader will one day face the moment when authority is reduced or transferred. The applause that once filled public squares may fade. The attention that once followed every statement may shift elsewhere. New voices will emerge, and new challenges will define the future. Such transitions are not signs of failure, they are natural parts of leadership itself. The healthiest leaders understand this reality and prepare for it. They recognize that their role is not to hold power forever, but to use it responsibly while they have the opportunity. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of power is how quickly perceptions can change. A leader who is celebrated today may be criticized tomorrow. Policies once praised may later be questioned. Decisions that seemed wise in one moment may be reassessed by future generations. This constant reevaluation further emphasizes that power is temporary because public judgment evolves over time. Leaders cannot control how history will remember them, but they can influence that judgment through the choices they make while entrusted with authority. The temporary nature of power ultimately reveals a deeper truth about leadership itself. Power is not an achievement to be possessed indefinitely. It is a responsibility given for a season. It carries opportunities, obligations, and consequences. The leader who understands this reality approaches authority with humility, restraint, and purpose. They recognize that their position is part of a larger story that began before them and will continue after them. They understand that while titles may disappear and influence may fade, the effects of their actions can endure for generations. If power is temporary, accountability is enduring. Positions of authority may change hands, titles may be lost, and public attention may shift elsewhere, but accountability remains long after the exercise of power has ended. It is the invisible companion of leadership, following every decision, every promise, and every action. While power gives a leader the ability to shape events, accountability determines how those actions will ultimately be judged. This is why accountability often outlives authority itself. A leader may leave office, but the consequences of leadership continue to affect people, institutions, and nations for years, sometimes even generations. Accountability is rooted in a simple principle: those who are entrusted with responsibility must answer for how they use it. Leadership is not merely about possessing authority, it is about being responsible for the outcomes of that authority. Every decision made by a leader carries consequences. Some decisions create opportunities, strengthen communities, and improve lives. Others may produce hardship, division, or long-lasting challenges. Accountability ensures that these consequences are not forgotten simply because a leader's term or influence has ended. One of the reasons accountability is so powerful is that it operates on multiple levels. There is accountability to the people who are directly affected by decisions. Citizens remember whether promises were fulfilled or abandoned. Communities remember whether their concerns were addressed or ignored. Families remember whether policies improved their lives or made their struggles more difficult. Even when official records fade into archives, the experiences of ordinary people become part of a leader's legacy. The memory of those experiences often shapes how future generations view leadership. Accountability also exists in the realm of history. Historical judgment can be patient, but it is rarely absent. Leaders are often remembered not for the speeches they delivered or the titles they held, but for the impact they had on society. Some are celebrated because they used their authority to promote justice, stability, and progress. Others are criticized because their actions caused suffering or undermined institutions. Time has a way of separating image from reality. The excitement of political moments may fade, but the results of leadership remain available for examination. Historians, scholars, and future citizens continue asking questions about what was achieved, what was neglected, and what consequences followed. This enduring nature of accountability means that leadership should never be viewed as a privilege without obligations. Every position of authority comes with a trust placed by others. Whether that trust is granted through elections, appointments, or public support, it carries expectations. People expect leaders to act responsibly, make informed decisions, and prioritize the common good over personal interests. Accountability serves as the mechanism that protects this trust. Without it, power can easily become detached from responsibility. A society that values accountability creates stronger institutions and healthier governance. When leaders know they will be evaluated for their actions, they are more likely to act with care and consideration. Accountability encourages transparency because leaders understand that their decisions may be examined. It promotes integrity because actions can be compared with promises. It strengthens public confidence because citizens know that authority is not beyond scrutiny. In this way, accountability is not a burden imposed on leadership. It is a safeguard that protects both leaders and the people they serve. The absence of accountability can be dangerous. History offers many examples of leaders who believed that authority alone could shield them from consequences. In such situations, power often becomes disconnected from responsibility. Decisions may be made without regard for their impact, criticism may be ignored, public concerns may be dismissed. For a time, it may appear that accountability has been avoided. However, consequences eventually emerge. Economic failures, social unrest, institutional weakness, or historical criticism often reveal the cost of leadership that operated without sufficient accountability. The lesson is clear: accountability delayed is not accountability eliminated. Accountability is also personal. Beyond institutions, laws, and public opinion, every leader must eventually confront their own record. Positions may end, but individuals remain aware of the choices they made. Leadership involves moments where difficult decisions must be taken, competing interests balanced, and competing pressures managed. Not every outcome can be controlled, and not every challenge can be solved perfectly. Accountability does not require perfection. Rather, it requires honesty, responsibility, and a willingness to accept the consequences of decisions. Leaders who embrace accountability understand that mistakes can occur, but they also understand the importance of acknowledging those mistakes and learning from them. An important aspect of accountability is that it applies equally during success and failure. Many people associate accountability with criticism, but true accountability also involves giving credit where it is deserved. When leaders achieve positive outcomes through wise decisions and effective governance, accountability ensures those achievements are recognized. It creates a fair assessment of leadership by examining both strengths and weaknesses. This balanced approach strengthens public trust because it focuses on evidence rather than emotion. The enduring nature of accountability also teaches an important lesson about legacy. Many leaders focus on gaining power, maintaining influence, or achieving immediate objectives. Yet the lasting measure of leadership is often determined after power has faded. Future generations rarely remember every political speech or campaign slogan. Instead, they evaluate whether leadership improved lives, strengthened institutions, expanded opportunities, and addressed the challenges of its time. Accountability becomes the lens through which that evaluation occurs. For citizens, accountability is not merely something to expect from leaders, it is something to actively uphold. Democracies, institutions, and communities remain healthy when people remain engaged, informed, and willing to ask questions. Accountability thrives where transparency is valued and where leadership is subject to scrutiny. It weakens when citizens become indifferent or when authority is treated as untouchable. Therefore, accountability is a shared responsibility between leaders and the societies they serve. Ultimately, accountability endures because consequences endure. Decisions made today shape realities tomorrow. Policies affect lives long after they are announced. Actions create outcomes that extend beyond the period of authority itself. This is why accountability remains even when power disappears. The office may become vacant, the title may belong to someone else, and public attention may move on, but the record of leadership remains. It continues to be examined, discussed, and judged by those who inherit its consequences. In this way, accountability becomes one of the most enduring forces in public life, ensuring that leadership is measured not by the amount of power held, but by the responsibility with which that power was used. Leadership is often misunderstood as a position of privilege, prestige, and authority. People frequently associate leadership with influence, recognition, and the ability to make decisions that affect others. While these elements are certainly part of leadership, they do not define its true essence. At its core, leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege. It is a commitment to serve, to guide, and to carry the weight of decisions that impact the lives of individuals, communities, and nations. The moment leadership is viewed primarily as a privilege, it begins to lose its purpose. The moment it is understood as a responsibility, it becomes a force for progress and positive change. Every position of leadership exists because people place trust in someone to act on their behalf. Whether in government, business, education, or community organizations, leaders are entrusted with resources, authority, and opportunities that are intended to benefit others. This trust creates an obligation. Leadership is not simply about having the power to act, it is about having the duty to act wisely, fairly, and responsibly. The authority associated with leadership is therefore not an end in itself, but a tool that must be used to fulfill responsibilities. The distinction between privilege and responsibility is significant because it shapes how leaders approach their roles. A leader who views leadership as a privilege may focus primarily on personal benefits. They may become preoccupied with status, recognition, comfort, or the preservation of their own position. Decisions may increasingly be influenced by personal interests rather than the needs of those they serve. Over time, such an approach can weaken trust and create a gap between leaders and the people who depend on them. By contrast, a leader who understands leadership as a responsibility approaches authority with a different mindset. Instead of asking what can be gained from a position, they ask what can be contributed through it. They recognize that every decision carries consequences and that every action affects others. This perspective encourages humility because responsibility requires an awareness of the impact leadership has on people's lives. It reminds leaders that authority is not a reward for personal achievement alone, but a commitment to serve a larger purpose. One of the clearest signs of responsible leadership is the willingness to place the interests of others above personal convenience. Leadership often requires difficult choices. There are moments when decisions must be made that are unpopular but necessary. There are times when leaders must accept criticism, face uncertainty, and shoulder burdens that others cannot see. These challenges reveal the true nature of leadership. If leadership were merely a privilege, such sacrifices would make little sense. However, when leadership is understood as responsibility, these sacrifices become part of the role itself. History provides countless examples of leaders who embraced responsibility over privilege. Their greatness was not measured solely by their authority, but by their willingness to serve despite challenges. They faced crises, made difficult decisions, and often endured personal hardship for the benefit of others. Their legacies endure because they viewed leadership not as a platform for self-interest, but as an opportunity to make a meaningful difference. Their examples demonstrate that the most respected leaders are often those who carried the heaviest responsibilities with integrity and determination. Responsibility in leadership also requires accountability. A leader who understands their obligations recognizes that authority must be accompanied by transparency and answerability. They do not seek to avoid scrutiny or criticism. Instead, they accept that leadership involves being accountable for outcomes, both positive and negative. This willingness to be accountable strengthens trust because people can see that leadership is grounded in responsibility rather than entitlement. Accountability transforms authority from a personal possession into a public trust. Another important aspect of responsible leadership is stewardship. Leaders are often entrusted with institutions, resources, and opportunities that existed before them and will continue after them. Their responsibility is not merely to manage these assets for the present, but to preserve and strengthen them for the future. This requires long-term thinking. Leaders who focus only on immediate benefits may achieve temporary success, but leaders who embrace stewardship consider the lasting effects of their actions. They understand that future generations will inherit the results of today's decisions. The concept of leadership as responsibility also changes the way success is measured. If leadership is viewed as privilege, success may be defined by personal advancement, popularity, or the accumulation of influence. However, if leadership is viewed as responsibility, success is measured by impact. It is reflected in stronger institutions, improved lives, expanded opportunities, and positive outcomes for the people being served. This broader perspective encourages leaders to focus on meaningful achievements rather than personal recognition. Responsible leadership requires empathy as well. Leaders make decisions that affect people from diverse backgrounds and circumstances. To lead effectively, they must understand the challenges, concerns, and aspirations of those they serve. Empathy helps leaders appreciate the human consequences of their choices. It reminds them that policies, strategies, and decisions are not abstract concepts. They affect real lives. By remaining connected to the experiences of others, leaders are better equipped to fulfill their responsibilities with fairness and compassion. The idea that leadership is a responsibility rather than a privilege also applies beyond formal positions of authority. Every individual who influences others, whether within a family, workplace, school, or community, exercises a form of leadership. The same principle remains true. Influence creates responsibility. The ability to guide others carries obligations. Leadership is not reserved for those with official titles. It is demonstrated whenever individuals choose to act in ways that positively impact those around them. Societies benefit when leadership is consistently viewed through the lens of responsibility. Citizens are more likely to trust leaders who demonstrate service, accountability, and integrity. Institutions become stronger when leaders prioritize long-term stability over short-term advantage. Communities flourish when authority is exercised with a genuine commitment to the common good. This understanding creates a culture in which leadership is respected not because of the power it grants, but because of the responsibilities it fulfills. Ultimately, the true measure of leadership is not found in the privileges associated with authority. Titles, recognition, and influence may attract attention, but they are temporary aspects of leadership. What endures is the impact created through responsible action. The leaders who leave the most meaningful legacies are not necessarily those who possess the greatest power. They are those who understood that leadership was a trust to be honored, a duty to be fulfilled, and a responsibility to serve others with wisdom, integrity, and purpose. In contemporary discussions about leadership, Ibrahim Traoré has become more than a political figure. He has become a symbol of public expectation and scrutiny. Whether people view him with admiration, curiosity, hope, or skepticism, his rise has drawn intense attention because it reflects a broader phenomenon that occurs whenever a leader emerges during a period of uncertainty and change. In such moments, citizens often project their aspirations, frustrations, and expectations onto a single individual. The leader becomes a symbol of what people hope might be possible, but that symbolic status also brings an equally powerful force of scrutiny. Public expectation is one of the strongest forces in political life. When a leader appears at a time of economic difficulty, social dissatisfaction, or political transition, many people look to that leader for solutions. They hope for stability, reform, dignity, security, and opportunity. Supporters may see the leader as someone capable of breaking with the past and creating a better future. These expectations can be enormous, often extending far beyond what any individual can realistically accomplish. The leader becomes associated not only with policies and decisions, but with the collective hopes of a nation. In the case of Ibrahim Traoré, much of the attention surrounding him reflects this dynamic. To many observers, he represents a new generation of leadership, one that speaks to desires for sovereignty, national pride, and change. For others, he represents a test can bold rhetoric and popular support be translated into lasting improvements in governance, security, and economic conditions. These differing perspectives demonstrate why he has become a symbol, rather than merely a public official. Symbols attract powerful emotions because people often see in them a reflection of larger national and historical questions. Yet the moment a leader becomes a symbol of public expectation, scrutiny intensifies. Every speech is analyzed, every decision is debated, every success is highlighted, and every failure is magnified. Supporters search for evidence that their hopes are being fulfilled, while critics look for signs that promises are not matching reality. This scrutiny is not unique to one leader or one country. It is a fundamental feature of public life. The more a leader symbolizes change, the more closely people watch to see whether that change is truly occurring. Scrutiny serves an important democratic and societal function. It reminds leaders that public trust is not unconditional. Citizens have the right to evaluate whether leadership is producing results. They ask difficult questions: are conditions improving? Are institutions becoming stronger? Are promises being honored? Is power being used responsibly? These questions are not signs of hostility toward leadership. They are signs that people understand leadership carries consequences. A leader who becomes a symbol of public expectation inevitably becomes a subject of public examination. One challenge for symbolic leaders is that expectations can become larger than reality. A single leader may be expected to solve problems that have developed over decades. Structural economic issues, security challenges, institutional weaknesses, and social divisions are rarely resolved quickly. When hopes are exceptionally high, even genuine progress may appear insufficient because people expect transformation at an extraordinary pace. This creates a difficult environment in which leaders must balance inspiration with practical governance. Another challenge is that symbolism can sometimes overshadow institutions. When public attention becomes heavily focused on one individual, there is a risk that national progress is measured solely through that person's image, rather than through the strength of laws, institutions, and systems. Sustainable development usually depends not only on charismatic leadership, but also on effective institutions that can endure beyond any single leader's tenure. For this reason, scrutiny often extends beyond personal popularity to questions about governance, transparency, and long-term stability. The relationship between expectation and scrutiny is also shaped by communication. In the modern world, leaders are constantly visible through speeches, interviews, social media, and global news coverage. This visibility amplifies both support and criticism. Admirers can quickly spread messages of praise, while critics can rapidly circulate concerns and objections. As a result, symbolic leaders operate in an environment where public opinion can shift quickly and where narratives compete for attention. Managing this environment requires not only political skill, but also consistency between words and actions. Importantly, becoming a symbol of public expectation does not guarantee either success or failure. It simply means that leadership is being viewed through a larger lens. People are not only evaluating policies, They are evaluating whether the leader represents a meaningful direction for the future. This is why symbolic leaders often face unusually intense reactions. Their supporters may defend them passionately because they see them as embodying national aspirations. Their critics may challenge them forcefully because they believe the stakes are exceptionally high. For citizens, the example of a leader who becomes a symbol offers an important lesson about political maturity. Hope is valuable, but it should be accompanied by thoughtful evaluation. Admiration should not eliminate critical thinking, and criticism should not ignore genuine achievements. Healthy societies benefit when citizens can hold two ideas at once. Leaders may inspire hope, and leaders must still be evaluated by results. Expectation without scrutiny can lead to blind loyalty, while scrutiny without fairness can prevent constructive progress. For leaders themselves, symbolic status should encourage humility. Public enthusiasm can be powerful, but it is not the same as permanent success. The admiration of today can become the questioning of tomorrow if expectations are not met. Leaders who understand this reality are more likely to focus on substance rather than image. They recognize that lasting legitimacy is built not only through inspiring speeches or popular support, but through measurable improvements in the lives of the people they serve. Ultimately, the significance of Ibrahim Traoré as a symbol lies in what he represents beyond his individual story. He reflects the enduring human tendency to invest leaders with hope during times of uncertainty. At the same time, he demonstrates that public hope is inseparable from public scrutiny. The higher the expectations, the closer the examination. The louder the praise, the more important accountability becomes. This balance between aspiration and evaluation is one of the defining realities of modern leadership, ensuring that leaders are remembered not only for the hopes they inspired, but also for the results they delivered. Every leader leaves behind something greater than a title, a position, or a period of time in office. Long after speeches are forgotten, ceremonies have ended, and authority has passed to others, a leader's legacy remains. Legacy is the lasting imprint of leadership. It is the collection of decisions, actions, values, and consequences that continue to influence people after a leader is no longer in power. This is why the legacy leaders leave behind after authority is gone as one of the most important measures of leadership itself. Many people focus on the acquisition of power, but history tends to focus on what was done with that power. Authority may last for years or even decades, but legacy can endure for generations. A leader's influence does not necessarily end when their term ends. The roads they built, the institutions they strengthened or weakened, the opportunities they created, the conflicts they resolved or intensified, and the values they promoted often continue shaping society long afterward. In this sense, leadership extends beyond the present moment and becomes part of a nation's historical journey. One reason legacy matters so much is that power is temporary while consequences are enduring. During their time in office, leaders possess the ability to make decisions that affect millions of people. Some of these decisions produce immediate results, while others unfold gradually over time. A policy introduced today may influence future generations. An institutional reform may continue benefiting society long after its creator has departed. Conversely, poor decisions can create problems that persist for years. The effects of leadership do not disappear simply because authority changes hands. They remain embedded in the realities people experience every day. History consistently demonstrates that legacy is often different from popularity. A leader may enjoy immense public support during their tenure, but later face criticism as the long-term consequences of their decisions become clear. Likewise, some leaders who faced opposition during their time in power are later recognized for making difficult choices that ultimately benefited society. This distinction highlights an important truth. Legacy is not determined by temporary applause. It is determined by lasting impact. The concept of legacy encourages leaders to think beyond immediate political gains. In many situations, leaders face a choice between pursuing short-term popularity and investing in long-term progress. The first option may generate immediate praise, while the second may require patience, sacrifice, and difficult decisions. Leaders who understand the importance of legacy often choose the path that benefits future generations, even if the rewards are not immediately visible. They recognize that true leadership involves preparing a better future rather than merely managing the present. A meaningful legacy is rarely built through words alone. Speeches can inspire, promises can generate hope, and slogans can capture attention, but legacy is ultimately built through actions. People remember what leaders accomplished more than what they claimed they would accomplish. They remember whether institutions became stronger or weaker. They remember whether opportunities expanded or diminished. They remember whether leadership promoted unity or deepened division. Actions create outcomes, and outcomes shape legacy. One of the most enduring aspects of a leader's legacy is the condition of the institutions they leave behind. Strong institutions provide stability, accountability, and continuity. They ensure that progress does not depend entirely on one individual. Leaders who strengthen institutions create benefits that outlast their personal influence. Their contribution becomes part of the nation's foundation. By contrast, leaders who weaken institutions may achieve temporary control, but often leave behind challenges that future generations must address. The health of institutions frequently serves as one of the clearest indicators of a leader's long-term impact. Legacy is also reflected in the opportunities available to ordinary people. Citizens often evaluate leadership through practical realities. Did education improve? Did economic opportunities expand? Did communities become safer? Were public services strengthened? These questions matter because leadership ultimately exists to serve people. A leader's legacy is closely connected to whether the lives of citizens improve during and after their tenure. While historical analysis may involve complex political discussions, ordinary people often remember leadership through its tangible effects on their daily lives. Another important dimension of legacy is moral example. Leaders influence not only policies but also values. Their behavior can shape public expectations regarding integrity, accountability, responsibility, and service. When leaders demonstrate honesty, humility, and respect for institutions, they help establish standards that others may follow. Conversely, when leaders normalize misconduct, corruption, or abuse of power, they can contribute to a culture that undermines trust and stability. The ethical example set by leaders often becomes part of their enduring legacy. The passage of time plays a crucial role in determining how legacy is understood. Immediate reactions to leadership are often shaped by emotions, political loyalties, and contemporary circumstances. As years pass, however, a broader perspective emerges. Historians, scholars, and citizens gain greater ability to evaluate outcomes objectively. They can compare promises with results and intentions with consequences. This long-term assessment often reveals aspects of leadership that were not fully visible at the time. Legacy, therefore, becomes a conversation between the present and the future. For leaders, the awareness of legacy can serve as a guiding principle. It encourages them to ask important questions. Will this decision benefit future generations? Will this policy strengthen society in the long run? Will this action contribute to greater stability, justice, and opportunity? Thinking in terms of legacy shifts attention away from personal gain and toward lasting contribution. It reminds leaders that their ultimate reputation will depend less on the authority they possessed and more on the impact they created. For citizens, understanding the importance of legacy promotes thoughtful evaluation of leadership. It encourages people to look beyond rhetoric, symbolism, and temporary political excitement. Instead of judging leadership solely by popularity or personality, citizens can focus on outcomes and long-term effects. This perspective strengthens democratic accountability because it emphasizes substance over image. Leaders are assessed not only by what they say, but by what remains after they are gone. Perhaps the most profound lesson about legacy is that every leader eventually becomes part of history. No position lasts forever. Every administration ends, every government changes, and every leader eventually leaves the stage. What remains is the record of what was accomplished, what was neglected, what was strengthened, and what was weakened. Future generations inherit these results and use them to evaluate leadership. In this way, legacy becomes the final chapter of every leadership story, transforming temporary authority into lasting judgment and turning the actions of a single period into lessons that continue shaping society long after power has disappeared.